G'day, I'm Chris Jordaan. I'm the President and CEO of Superior Gold. And I'd like to talk a little bit today about our Q2 results and how we're looking forward in working ourselves towards the goals that we set out from our growth strategy, and look forward to the conversation.
Chris, good to see you. Saw you back in June. Q2. You want to talk about it? We want to talk about it, and your shareholders definitely want to talk about it. Really tough quarter. What went wrong?
Yeah, so I think I first want to talk about the things that went well, because we've been putting a lot of effort over a wide spread of things insofar as business performance. And the first one I want to call out is our safety performance, which has improved markedly from the end of December last year. And we've seen a reduction in our recordable injury frequency rate of 24% since December. So I'm very happy with that. And that also talks to the way that we manage our risks, etc. Insofar as operations are concerned, there were two major events in the second quarter that had a material impact on our performance. The first one being COVID and how that played out after the restrictions were lifted here in WA. In fact, if we look over history since COVID came in, we typically ran between 2 and 5% of people being affected by COVID. And once again, that cuts not only our own people, but also talks to our service or impacts our service providers. That in fact increased in May leading into June to as high as 12 to 14% of people being affected. And that had a material impact on our rate of access and of progress on the open pit, as well as it had a negative impact on the rate of development for the underground mine. So those were two things.
But Chris, got to stop you. I'm sorry. COVID, I mean, is that still a thing? I mean, can't people function? I mean, it seems to be the world's like functioning normally and getting on with it with COVID around.
I think there's probably two things there. The first thing is what we've realized with COVID is that it's definitely still around, and it peaks and troughs. What we have seen over the last few weeks is that it's dropped off quite markedly, and it's being sustained at a level, in our case, below 4 and 5%. So we're very happy with that on the one hand, but it sometimes impacts a specific area. For instance, we had a few weeks ago a situation where our open pit operators, for some reason, most of them were affected, and we lost half our shift. So that happens as well. Moving on into the future, and given that it's dropping off now, I think it's a very important thing to keep our eye on. What we have seen is once we had that spike, our expectation was, all right, we're going to get in here and we're going to, get back on track really quickly. And that was not the case. And what we're seeing, and there's some phenomena being aired at the moment, whereby one has, or many people suffer from what they call long COVID. So the level of productivity from people immediately after having COVID seems to be lower than what the expectation was. And of course, the flu hit WA soon after that. But be that as it may, it's certainly something that impacts our operations from time to time. But certainly, we haven't seen that to the extent that it happened in May and June last.
But what are the rules, regulations, or from outside in terms of pressures and internally in terms of the way that you manage these things? Because again, I come back to, we're seeing a lot of people like going back to work, and there's a kind of light touch to it. So like if you don't feel too bad, sure, come in, but take precautionary measures. But is it as onerous as it once was in WA there? Or I
think it's very similar. It's not mandated anymore to wear a mask, but we request people to use masks on site. The one thing we're absolutely adamant about is we want to keep the flu and COVID away from the operations, because that's a key group of people that are in the business running the operations, and as soon as you have those people being affected, immediately you have an impact on production rates. So what we try and do is, and sorry, the message is very clear. Anyone that shows COVID-related signs or flu, stay at home. You just don't get on the plane. So we're very strict with that. I think to a large extent we've been able to keep the site relatively COVID-free. The downside of that, of course, is that it's very easily a high number of people that gets affected and don't pitch for work. So it still remains challenging at this stage.
Yeah, I guess that it's a tough one, because you say you're successful at sort of keep making sure people stay at home and make sure it doesn't spread, but it is spreading and it's affected your Q2 numbers. So maybe you're not alone in this one. But okay, the other thing that you attribute the decrease in production to is water. Again, is this not a seasonal thing? Should you not have expected that?
I think that's a very good point. I just want to make one more remark on COVID. Now, if we look at our rates of 12 to 14% of people being affected, anecdotally, I've heard evidence of other operations in the region up to 30 and 40% of people being affected by COVID. So,
wow.
I think you're absolutely right. It is something that has affected most operations. And the second thing I want to talk about, as you quite rightly pointed out, is the high rainfall we had. And it's interesting, May, we had that rainfall event, which had a significant impact on our open pit operations. In fact, our airport was closed for more than 2 weeks. So we couldn't get people in, we couldn't get people off. So typically, and historically, May usually has about 15 millimeters of rain cumulative. We had, in the space of a few days, 143 millimeters of rain. So the impact was just significant. And as our general manager explained to me, it's because that area is so flat, the water doesn't flow away. It just sits there. So even some, even some of the cap roads were inaccessible. So moving around was really difficult during that time. And insofar as the open pit is concerned, what we had was in the early days of the open pit, our benches were not developed to its full depth or full width. And we had some material running onto the edge of the against the high wall of the benches. And that also impacted our ability to enter there. I'm happy to say now that the benches are established. And, even if we do have another rain event like that, with people on site, we will be able to work through that insofar as operations on the open pit.
Oh, that's interesting, actually. So it's not just a case of open pit filling with water. It's you can't land airplanes. You can't move machinery around.
Yes.
Right. Okay. And how long did that last? How long did that take you?
So the impact, as I said, the airport, we had to close the airport for, I think it was just over 2 weeks. And the reason for that, our airstrip is not capped. So it's a gravel airstrip, and it needs to have a certain hardness before the planes are allowed to land. So that kept us from bringing in our FIFO aircraft.
Right. Okay. So those are the things that you mentioned in the article that I read. But ultimately, this is about you. I know this is a turnaround story. You come in, your track record, and the team they brought on it's a turnaround team, turnaround story here. But the number that was we've talked about a lot in the past is you're aiming for 100,000 ounces a year. You just changed guidance and lowered it to between 69 and 75,000 ounces, and your costs have gone up. This is becoming a tough story to fall in love with. So why should people kind of stay the course with you? Yeah,
I think that's a great question. So we certainly done a lot of introspection as to what we need to do to get back on track. In essence, I firmly still believe in the story, and in fact, I've just purchased 2 watts of stock. So from that perspective, I'm fully committed. I think the key thing here is the impact of COVID and the water situation we had and the recovery out of that situation. All it did was to delay the time at which we will achieve that 100,000 or working towards that 100,000 ounce per annum rate. As you'd remember, we wanted to achieve it in Q3 of this year. That's not going to be possible. We're putting everything, behind the wheel to try and achieve towards that in Q4. And there's a few things that we're doing there, right? So one of the things that was impacted was, of course, the average grade at which we run the milling facility. So getting the underground back on track, increasing underground feed to the mill will ultimately then help increase the grade from the underground. In addition to that, we've also increased our development rate. We was in the beginning of August, and it's now fully commissioned. We purchased a brand new jumbo that arrived, and we already see an uptick in development from previous levels, and we hope to ultimately increase it and surpass rates that we saw in the beginning of this year. In addition to that, two things that we have done really well, and I think has turned the tide. We focused on two other things. Firstly, getting the open pit up and running at a stable level, and I think reaching that is imminent. We've done a lot of work over the last 6 weeks insofar as establishing the benches, getting them on the same level, and then ultimately going to that next flinch where we start getting to the higher grade in the open pit. And then the other thing that we've done that's going to stand us in good stead leading into this 100,000 ounce per annum annualized rate is the mill throughput. And I'm very happy to say, we've done the shutdown in Q1. We did the mill reline of all three mills in May, and we immediately then started seeing the mill running much more consistently. And we're seeing a milling rate leading up to about 1.78, 1.79 million tons delivered at this stage, and we're hoping to push it even further. So as far as the open pit's concerned, I think we're there very close to stabilizing operations there. The mill throughput has picked up. The only thing that we still need to solve, and we're working very hard at it together with the additional jumbo or the new jumbo that we purchased, is to get the mining rate up on the underground. You would also remember I spoke earlier before whereby we are replacing altogether 6 pieces of mobile equipment, 3 trucks and 3 boggers with either new or reconditioned units. That will immediately see us improve the productivity of those units through better utilization and availability of those pieces of kit. So everything is aligned to ultimately achieve what we set out to do. And once again, the way that we see this, all this has caused was a delay in us achieving what we wanted to achieve. So we hope then ultimately to see also we're going to see increased production and then start seeing that cost coming back to lower levels.
Okay, 2 things. One, I think you better check with Matron. You get that cough checked out. Secondly, is obviously with the reduction in guidance for production and the increase, like it's not just a little bit. You're up 27%, up to an increase $410 an ounce. Mm-hmm. I know you've got, as of end of June, just over 18 million bucks Aussie, but isn't that going to impact your ability to do the things that you want to do? Are you going to have to raise capital to be able to get back up to this annualized run rate of 100,000?
Right. 2 things I want to say there. First is $18.2 million US.
US, got you. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
And the second thing is, if you look at our year-to-date costs, we had about $1,830 per ounce. We're going to increase the production. We know we're going to see a reduction in cost, and we'll be pulling our costs in line, and ultimately then move back into a position where we start generating some good cash. So once again, what we will need money for would be, of course, further expansions, and whether we generate through our own or finance it through our own cash generation or external funding. That remains to be seen. And the reason why I say remains to be seen, you would remember we released our mineral resource and reserve, saw quite a significant uptick on our reserve. We are now in the final stages of the first draft of our life of mine. And that will give us, all the different options and, of course, show what the priorities are insofar as taking the operations forward and at a minimum stabilize the operations towards that 100,000 ounce per annum production rate. So I think it's once again, as you quite rightly said, it's a turnaround story. We've hit a curve in the second quarter. We're putting all our efforts in to get back on track. And once again, it's a delay of our plan rather than, an issue whereby we won't be able to achieve it.
Right. Okay. It is a turnaround story, and I know it. And I said a lot to my guys: is mining's tough. There's going to be bumps along the road. but it's a question of, what does that kind of medium-term journey look like? Is there a positive growth component to it? But nevertheless, you've got shareholders right now who are concerned because of the history of this project. You've been brought in to turn this around. You've hit a bump fairly early on in the process here, for, not the first time this company is kind of failing to hit guidance. With regards to remuneration, you say you're buying shares, which is great, but does something like this affect the way that you remunerate yourself and the team with regards to, delivering on whatever it is that you're remunerated on? Do you say, well, actually, we'll share some of the pain here. We're not going to give ourselves bonuses this year. We'll wait till we kind of get back on track again. How do you view that?
Well, I think the way that we set up our variable component of our remuneration is one that takes consideration of the good and the bad. So needless to say, if we don't achieve our targets, immediately it impacts on us individually as management and on on the operations. Now, if you look at variable pay, we've got different structures in the organization whereby more senior levels is based on annual performance, whereby the operations is more based on a quarterly performance. And they've certainly seen the impact. There's no doubt. The second quarter variable pay was significantly lower than what we see in Q1. So that goes up and down depending on the performance of the business. And the premise there is make variable pay meaningful. However, when it goes, when we go through a tough time, we all share in the pain. When it goes well, we share in the benefit. Okay.
Well, I guess people are kind of keen to see the pain being shared there. Obviously, share price off from 80 cents when we spoke back in early June down to 45 now. Recent announcement hasn't kind of helped that, but ultimately people are looking to the future. So can we just look at some of the kind of cost components? I suspect, obviously, with increased production, with the elements that you put in place, we'll see the cost side come down a little bit. But what are the big components that will really drive and affect the price there? Because you're working in an inflationary environment. You tell me COVID is still alive and well and affecting businesses, not just yours, but others too. So, can you see a way out of this, or is this just a case of waiting for inflation to fall back down? And I guess people are talking about 2024 to get back down to, rates that we're more comfortable with.
Yeah, look, certainly in our position, we cannot wait for inflation to help us. At the end of the day, we need to pull all stops to reduce our costs. So certainly, there's a few buckets that we're spending a lot of time on. You mentioned remuneration. If I look at remuneration on the senior levels, a little bit more than a year ago versus now, we're seeing a reduction. There's further opportunity for reduction in that. But I think the other big cost buckets that we're looking at, apart from increasing production and getting that fixed cost dilution, is a number of things around our efficiencies. One example is driving productivity on the rate at which we develop. So we're achieving more with less. To give you an example, we've made some modifications when we ordered the new jumbo, and that's just been effective. We immediately saw an impact from that coming through. In addition to that,
like what? Tell me about that. I'm interested. What does that mean?
So it's interesting. The old jumbos that we had ran on 3.9 meter steel, so it's the drill length, and we've now changed it out with a new one to 4.9 meters. So for the same effort at a higher drill rate, you cover almost a meter more with every cut that you take. So it's a material change, almost with a swing of a wand. So I think it's also about us getting back to standards and benchmarks that should be expected from these pieces of kit. So in addition to that, we started looking at our overall cost on a number of areas, both in the underground, the open pit, as well as in the processing plant, including G&A. We've identified a whole pipeline of opportunities there that's been fed into the system by which we, at a very high frequency and cadence, drive that cost out of the business. In fact, we've committed with our board to achieve specific cost out targets. That work is happening as we speak. And that talks to efficiencies around Specific things that we saw had material impact on our costs. For instance, our use of cyanide, etc., and it was mostly price driven. And what we're seeing now is that through managing demand, or the usage rates, and optimizing on it, we can start pulling back on those increases that we have in our costs. So that's just one example. There's a number of other examples that talks to our contractors and the rates at which we bring contractors in. Another example that we follow is we've appointed two people that's going to help us with our recruitment. So we've, to a large extent, reduced our external spend on recruitment. That's brought in water cash to the business or reduce expenses. Another opportunity that we're looking at is revising our capital spend to make sure that we spend the capital on the absolute requirements, and make sure that we move the spend of that capital to times whereby we know we'll be more in a better cash position. So there's a number of levers that we're pulling at this stage to try and reduce costs. Another option is working with some of the other operations to reduce flight costs, whereby, because we're running the open pit and we needed more people, we either had the choice of bringing in a full 77 person plane into the site. What we've now done is we've, in fact, working with one of the operations close to us to join in and put our people on their flights, and we just bring them over by bus. So there's various options that we're looking at, and I can tell you now we're not leaving a single stone unturned insofar as costs are concerned.
Well, it kind of sounds like it. It sounds like you're looking at the sum of the parts, but at the same time, it also feels like you're having to chip away and find small savings here and there, which is being swallowed up by this kind of vast storm out there. In terms of the economy, in terms of price of gold, down to $1,750 yesterday when I last looked. US, obviously. Looking at the inflationary impact globally, here in the UK, it was like, announced 2-3 weeks ago, 10%. Expectation is it'll hit 15-16 by next year. So, and this is also in the context of, you announced a sort of, $2.5 million loss in the last quarter. So, do you think these small things that you are in control of are going to be able to counter this huge storm out there that we're seeing for gold producers globally? Like I say, you're not on your own, but I want to know what you're going to do.
So I think you're absolutely right. It's some of a number of components you need to focus on. I think the extent to which we can optimize our own operations and think differently in the way that we mine and mine more efficiently. Those are the things which I think will have a material impact and a sustaining impact going forward. And it's not just delaying a spend or having a short period of benefit and then it just the price just shoots up again. So I think there's more than just looking at your spend, but also the way that money is being spent and on what it's being spent. And we've certainly seen a number of opportunities in the underground operations to improve the productivity of some of the pieces of kit that we're having, and also to engage with our service providers insofar as cost pressures that they're feeling, and at the end of the day, try and push back as hard as we can to keep those costs in line. So I think it's going to be a continued fight. I'm a firm believer that technology is one of the key levers that one over time needs to exploit in an operation like this to reduce costs, and that could be impacting on the type of or specific approach in some of the stopes that we follow that's driving our costs, or decisions that's being taken. So I think at the end of the day, it's all about getting back to the basics and driving productivity through a relentless focus on the basics and keeping at it. And I think that's where the sustainable benefit will come over time as inflation, keeps hammering on operations like ours, because we cannot rely on the gold price to save the day.
Have your shareholders and anyone else looking at this project got reason to be optimistic about what you're doing there?
I think most certainly, as I said in the beginning, what has happened in Q2 basically delayed our growth trajectory. We're still firmly focused on achieving that. We have a solid plan to deliver on it, and we are currently deploying it. The growth towards 100,000 ounce per annum rate, as I said, has been delayed because of COVID and the weather. But we're not sitting and hoping for better days to come by itself. We're actively targeting specific initiatives to not only reduce costs but also increase our throughput. And I still maintain that the focus that we put on the open pit, and we're seeing that grade improving over time. That'll certainly help us a long way. The fact that we will now refocus our attention on accelerating the development in the underground mine will give us access to better quality or better grade stopes as we carry on. So all in all, I firmly believe that we have the building blocks to deliver this. We are certainly in a better position than we were a few months ago, insofar as the mill throughput, insofar as the open pit operations, and we're pushing really hard on the underground to get that up to the rates that we wanted, and that will ultimately provide us appropriate grade. So once again, for me personally, I've invested in the business out of my own funds, and have bought stock. So has many of the other ExCo members to that, or has done similarly. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I would certainly see us delivering on what we said we're going to deliver. Is it going to be easy? No, it's not going to be easy. Every now and again, you do hit a curve. The key for us is to understand what are those levers in our control that we can pull to be able to get back on track. And that's exactly what we're doing at this moment. And the other thing that I want to say, the market can go out there and have a look at many other gold producers, certainly insofar as juniors are concerned, has been really hard on their stock, and it's on a back on of number of disappointing performances, and WA is no exception. There's we did a study, quick study on our peers here in WA, and many operators and operations are in exactly the same boat. I think the key for us is we've got quality infrastructure. We're in a tier 1 operating environment. We have a revised reserve, and we're busy pulling together a life of mine that's going to see this business sustainably and consistently deliver into the future whilst it works through challenging times like we've just had. So I still remain very positive about the business. And I've said it before, it is hard work. It takes a lot of effort. We've spent a lot of effort in pulling together and strengthening the team to deliver on it. And I've got a lot of trust in the team that we will achieve it.